and welcome to another Digital Photo Mentor live stream here on our YouTube channel, where we edit subscriber submitted images, or I do. Anyways, subscriber submitted images. And this week we are doing Lightroom. So I've received a bunch of images from followers, and I'm going to walk you through how to edit them, but also what I'm doing to them and why. So it's a great learning opportunity. If you're just joining in for the first time, you could submit your images for consideration for editing using the link that you see over there. And I'm going to hop over to Lightroom and get started. All right, as you can see, Linton, I have your image there already, and I read what you said about that. Looks like a really cool light show that you said you went to. That's too bad they wouldn't let you use a tripod. That's kind of a bummer. And let's see, we've got Stephen from Singapore. I answered a bunch of your questions in the chat. I don't have a course on those things specifically, but I put some links to some articles for you in the chat on manual mode, on ISO, and our beginner course. Welcome, Marty. Always good to have you join us. I already mentioned Linton, Down Under. We got a couple of Down Unders. Trish is here as well. What time is it for you, Trish? David, nice to see you. Stephanie, always welcome. She's here often. Marguerite, nice to see lots from the Lightroom class here today. This is awesome. Charles, Deb in Alaska, beautiful Alaska, awesome. And Sheila from down east in Canada, awesome. All right, well, we've got lots of regulars here, and I got this image of Linton's that I want to start with, and I'm just going to read to you what he said in the thing here, in the form. It was a part of Illuminate Adelaide, a light show festival. This was from a show in our botanical gardens. Very cool. I wasn't allowed to use a tripod, so I handheld it at 1/4 of a second. Didn't want to push the ISO too much. They're moving water and jets and moving lights. His wife wants him to get it printed, so he wants it to look good. All right. So, well, what Jenny wants, we want to make sure that Jenny gets. So I'm going to show you what I'm going to do to this one, and then you see if you can replicate it. And if you can't replicate it, Linton, you know what? I'll send you the exported file. All right. So, or if you don't have, I'm going to probably run it through Topaz Sharpen. But I wanted to look at the shooting information because he talked about the exposure that he used. So you've got a nice big aperture, which is great. And on this Sony, I believe this is an A6600, right? You probably could have gone higher with the ISO, like maybe another stop or up to 6400, which would have given you, you know, a little bit more latitude on the exposure. But I actually don't mind, you know, the water blurring, because when I do, Daniel and I actually did a light show like this in Lima in Peru. And when I'm doing stuff like this with fountains, I actually use a longer exposure, but I know you were limited because you didn't have a tripod. So did you brace it on something? I mean, if you can set it on the edge of something or something stable and use a shutter release instead of trying to press it with your finger. So if you're in a situation similar to this, as to what Linton was encountering, try those things, right? So use the 2-second timer so you're not touching the camera, press it, and then let it fire, or a release if you have one. So let's take a closer look at this one in the develop module. Okay. The first thing I want to check is the camera profile and see if there's a better camera profile. So that's that's my first step in all of my editing. And as I hover over, you can see these are the Sony profiles. As I move my mouse over, it gives me an idea of what that one is going to look like. Right. So neutral, portrait, vivid, standard. I almost always tend to go with the more neutral ones because when I add some black and white, it's probably going to, well, I know it's going to punch up the color anyways, right? Light looks like it's lightening a little bit, so I can see a little bit more of the sky and whatnot, but I can do that as well. So I think I'm going to go with the neutral one, but let's just see if there's any others down here under, say, modern. Right? These are ones that come with Lightroom. So if you haven't seen these camera profiles before, there's modern and vintage. Let me just close this here. There's modern and vintage down the bottom here. Okay. So you can actually just sort of scroll through them and see if there's anything that grabs you. That one's kind of cool, actually. Modern 4 lights up the blue. It gives us a little more blue. I mean, that looks a little bit more monochromatic than anything. And we get into some matte blacks and so on. So Modern 4 actually is not too bad. See how I just move my mouse off to the side to see the preview? It looks like it's lightening a little bit. So maybe let's try this one just for something different. Okay, now I want to see if there's anything clipping. So J is a keyboard shortcut in Lightroom to show the clipping warnings. You can see that I've got some clipping here. Another way you can do that is, for example, when I'm using the whites and the blacks, press the Alt Option key and then click on the slider. And anything that shows up like this here, I'll just drag it up so you can see it. Anything that shows up in white here when I'm doing this slider means that that area is clipping. So you want to try and avoid that. Okay, so currently there's a little bit of white clipping, but it's highlights and it's the actual lights. So I'm not too worried about it. But I can bring the highlights down. I'm pressing Alt Option again, same thing. Then I want to check the blacks, okay? Because this is a really contrasty night scene, I want to make sure that there are nice blacks, and that's going to increase the saturation as well, okay? So I almost never touch these two, vibrance and saturation. Let me get my mouse highlighter here. I almost never touch these two at the bottom here. I'm usually adding more black. Let me show you the difference. If I remove black, look at the colors on the image. Let me make it a little bigger. Okay, watch the colors. See how as I add black, the colors intensify? Okay, that just happens naturally. Okay, now I'm going to brighten up the whole thing just a little bit and play this dance. Okay, so brighten, highlights, darken, okay, and so on. You can actually see stars in the sky, and there is a little bit of noise, so we can probably do some denoise, and I can do that when I do sharpen, because sharpen with Topaz, Sharpen AI has an element of that as well. So I'm going to add a little bit of clarity. Okay. Now I want to take care of some of these bright highlights. Okay, so there's some bright areas over here, and it also looks like there's maybe a speaker or something. So you guessed it, I'm going to crop it. Okay, so R is a keyboard shortcut for that one. And I'm going to go off the regular aspect ratio because I don't think we need much of the water. Let's keep some of the highlights, and I'm just going to leave it so that there's that little black part in the corner there, about like that. I don't want to crop any more of that tree off. Actually, let's see what it looks like if we go pano. We could go pano, but I kind of like the fact that the stars are showing. Okay. In terms of white balance, let's just see what Lightroom thinks is white balance if I choose auto. Okay. Really blue. But look at the sky. Okay, so the sky is actually bluer now. So this is maybe closer to what we want. So I'm just going to go back to as shot, make a note of the number. So it's 5850. Okay, that's the temperature or the Kelvin degrees Kelvin. Then I'm going to try auto again, and it went down to 2850. So let's split the difference and go somewhere in the middle, maybe 3850 or 4000. Actually, I like it around 3500. And then we can play with this one a little bit. So I make sure that the sky isn't getting too green looking. Okay. So I'm just doing this dance again. Something like that. So now the sky looks a little bit more like nighttime as opposed to sort of grayish. Okay. I can also bring up the shadows, and you can see that that brings up the sky, but it also, let me do that a little bit more. It also brings out the noise, okay? I don't know if you can see that. Let me zoom in more. Can you see the noise there? Okay. If I increase the exposure, okay, there's the noise. So that's from the high, it's a combination, the high ISO and the slightly longer exposure. Right? Longer and longer exposures you do, the more noise you get as well. So noise comes from three things, not just a high ISO. It comes from high ISO, long exposure, and then it lives in what's called the blue channel. So your images are made up of red, green, blue, right? So it lives in the blue channel, which is what we have a lot of at night as well. Right? Now I'm going to check the highlights again. Now they've gone a little bit bright since I brightened the whole image. And let's just, I want to keep what's called the specular highlights. See, because that's an actual light. Okay, so I want to make sure that that one stays bright. And if I have a little bit of clipping on that one, I'm okay with it. Okay. Now let's do an edge vignette because I want to darken this part here and this tree. Okay, so I'm going to drag it down darker, turn the feather down to 0 so I can get it where I want it. And then I'm going to make it rounder and bring it in until I've got most of this edge and most of this tree. Maybe a little bit less round. Okay, so now I'm going to darken this area. Once I've got it where I want it, now I can bring the highlights back up, and I'm using the highlight priority. We'll try color as well, and bring the feather back up. Now I can just adjust for density. But see how it's minimizing this tree over here a little bit more? Okay. Let's try color priority. That one works well also. Right? So I do find when you're using color priority, you usually have to go a little bit darker. And it's okay that I let these highlights on the corner go dark. So I'll toggle this one off. So see what it's doing? It's taking this bush and this tree on the side and minimizing them, right? So our eyes now come more into the center of the light show. Okay? Now, if we want to intensify the color or shift the color, we have a couple of options. We can do that with the curves tool. We could go into HSL and work on the individual colors, or we can also go down into this calibration panel. Okay, so the blue saturation. Okay, so remember I talked about red, green, blue as your image is made up of those 3 things. Look what happens if you want more intense blue. Okay, this blue slider down here intensifies everything related to or having blue in it. Well, guess what? Pink has blue in it. Red has some blue in it. Right? Let's see what happens if I do green. Okay, we get more of the trees popping. So you have to decide, and maybe you tell me, Linton, do you want more trees popping or more of the water? I kind of like this version better myself. This one looks more like mysterious, right? He says 6400 gives you too much noise. Okay, so you've tested your camera, which is great that you know the limits of your camera for your personal preferences. That's perfect. Yeah. I agree, Stephanie. Yeah, it's a very cool image, right? And you could go a couple of different ways on this, even Linton. You could sharpen it, which is what I'm going to do, or we could actually go the other way and take it to Luminar Neo. I'm going to go to Photoshop, and he says you like the red. Okay, so you want more of the red, right? So this is the way I would tend to go. This gives us a little bit of blue and red, and then let's intensify the red even more. Okay, so something like that. Okay, now we can shift the hues as well. So I mean, we could go crazy with some hue adjustment, right? If you don't want the blue being so purple, we could shift it, and if we want the red more magenta, we could shift that as well. Okay. Green wasn't really doing it for me, so I'm just going to leave this one. So let me toggle this one on and off. Okay, see the difference that's making? It's doing a really nice job, I think. I'm going to take it probably a little farther just so that it's more obvious on your screen. And with an image like this, I mean, you can go extreme, right? You can go extreme because it's really just kind of about the light and the color, right? Okay, now let's deal with some of that noise. If you're going to do noise reduction in another program or sharpening in another program like I'm going to do, make sure it's turned off here. Okay, so Lightroom defaults the sharpening to 40, and I tend to leave it off when I take it somewhere else, or make sure you dial the masking up. Okay, so I'm holding the Alt Option key down, and when you drag this masking slider up, the higher you go, the more it masks or hides the effect of the sharpening off of smooth areas, okay? So it's not sharpening the sky, it's just sharpening the outlines of the things that are important, okay? So let's just take this up high so you can see what's happening. If I go zoom in here, let me see what zooming. Okay, so I'm at 200%, right? let me just turn the sharpening on and off. Try and get rid of this panel over here. Let me turn the sharpening off. So it's doing quite a lot, but when you sharpen and you have noise, you're going to get some more noise. Okay, so this is an extreme version. I would never sharpen this much. Let's just dial it back. Okay. So as I said, if you're going to pull it into Topaz or something else to sharpen, okay, leave the sharpening in Lightroom either off or really, really low. Okay. Now I want to try and pick up the stars a little bit more, right? But if I increase the whites, right, I'm going to get more of, ooh, that's kind of funky, isn't it? Look at that. So that was kind of a happy accident. I just pulled the whites up. And if you want really kind of psychedelic, we could go for something even crazier, right? Um, are you currently taking my Lightroom course, Linton? I haven't seen you in any of the classes. That's something that you might want to look at as well, because calibration tool is one of the things that I covered in that class, and a lot of people said the same thing, that it was not a tool that they used very often. And here's the honest thing is, I didn't use it that much before I taught it. And now that I've taught it, I realize I should use this more often. It's actually really cool. Right, so I cranked up the whites and look what it's doing on the water. Right, so that tells me a couple of things. I want to do this on the sky and the water. So I'm going to do a select sky, and let's see if Lightroom could find it. Let's hope. Okay, it's not bad. It's not bad. And I'm going to add to it a linear gradient, because I want to get the water as well. Okay, and I'm going to leave it. I don't need to fade it because I want just the water. Okay, so I want to just let it kind of match the shoreline here. And what I'm going to do with this, the mask will disappear as soon as I drag my slider, is increase the whites again. Okay, so what I just did on the overall image, see what it's doing on the water here? And it's also picking up more of the stars. Here, let me zoom out just a bit. Okay, so if I lower this, see how it's kind of, it is doing the noise, but it will pick up more of the stars that way. Okay, so when you have night photos, select your sky and increase the whites and the highlights. Okay, so see how the sky just picked up a little bit? See, watch when I do the highlights. Now it's not perfect because Lightroom has not done a perfect selection of the sky. So I'm going to keep it down a little bit without having to do sort of a lot more work masking in here, which I don't want to do. I just want to have this little glow sort of over the horizon, right? This thing gets in my road all the time. Okay, now if I want this to fade a bit more, I can just have it do like that, right? So let's see what this is doing. Turn it off and on. See how that's picking up the reflection and the sky. Okay. And I can even call it that. Okay, so that's my mask. Okay, now I think I either want to pull it into, I'm going to pull it into Photoshop next. Okay, so there's a few things that I want to get rid of, like this light here, this light in the background, and possibly even this box here, and possibly even this bubble in the foreground, right? Because that's really grabbing my attention. You guys remember the upside down trick? Okay, if I turn this upside down, where does your eye go? Right. For me, I mean the red, obviously, my eye goes there, but it also goes to this bubble and then this streak here. Okay, so I might minimize those ones a little bit. Okay. All right. I could do another radial gradient actually to do that here. Let's do another, sorry, linear gradient. I'm just going to drag it out from the edge and lower the highlights on the edge a little bit. And that helps to minimize those guys here. Okay. The other way that I can minimize this one here is to do a spot healing brush and just paint over it. I'm going to get a nice big spot, paint over it. And then when it chooses a new spot, I'm going to choose one that's close. Using heal, just turn down the opacity. Okay, I can either get rid of it completely with heal at 100%, or dial it back so that I'm just, see that? So the color matches. I'm at about 90%. If I turn that off, see, it's getting rid of that really bright spot. Okay. I could even try that with this bubble because I don't need to like get rid of it completely. Let me just see if I can match these. Trying to match up the lines a little bit. Let's get the dark water over here. I might try clone on this one. Yeah, this one's not going to match up as nicely, so I'm going to do that one in Photoshop, and I'm going to try this one as well just to see real quick if I can minimize it. So the cloning tool in Lightroom is limited because it's got not as many functions and capabilities as Photoshop, obviously. But you can see that by using this to dial it down, now I'm not happy with my reflection. It's mucking up the reflection. Okay, so that one's a Photoshop as well. All right, so now we're going to go to Photoshop. But I definitely minimized that one. Oops, I'm in the road. Hang on. There. There, can you see it? I definitely minimized this one over here. Okay, so let's take a before. So before and after. Lots more color, right? To go to Photoshop, I'm going to go right-click, edit in, and open a smart object. Okay, I'm not going to open it directly to Photoshop because I want it to be a smart object. Okay. So Sheila agrees with me. Upside down, her eye went right to the bubble. Yeah, so that's, you don't want to live on the bubble, right? Oh, I'm terrible. I'm full of puns, full of puns. I don't know if you saw the other day, Linton, but it was Linny's birthday yesterday or the day before, and I shared some photos of her, you know, from Peru and from our group, our dinner, the first dinner we had in Hanoi. So yeah, some good memories, and I miss having those adventures with you all. All right, okay, so now I'm in Photoshop. Let me just get my layers panel because it's over on my other monitor. Hang on, I gotta make it a little smaller. Okay, so I've widened it because I was doing something else. Now the trick is I gotta try and grab it. Oh, there it was. See that? There's one little area. There's one little area where I hover my mouse and I can make this panel smaller. It doesn't want to do it for me. There we go. Okay, there we are. All right. Now this object here, this thing here, I don't know if you can see this or not. Oh, it's going to work for me. Excellent. See this little thing in the corner of the thumbnail? That means it's a smart object. Okay. So when I do an edit on here, whatever I do, if I go to Topaz, if I go to Luminar Neo or something, then it's going to apply as a filter. Okay. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to filters, and I'm going to go to Topaz, and I'm going to use denoise because denoise AI has also a sharpening element. So I kind of like between the two, I could run both of them, but they both have capabilities. No, I don't want to do that, of denoising and sharpening. So I'm going to use the one that is the biggest issue, if that makes sense. Okay. So I want to get rid of some of this noise. So I'm going to go up here so I can see it, right? So we see the noise. And when you're in here, look at the difference. Look at what it's doing. Okay. So I can crank up this remove noise and see what it's doing. I'm going to recover some original detail because it's sort of blurring a little bit too much now. Okay. And there might be a little bit of color noise. Color noise is when you have like those pink and green speckles and you want to get rid of them. Okay. So this is under the denoise AI, and it's actually doing a pretty good job. I could bring the sharpness up again a little bit. Okay, so there's this balance because if I bring the sharpness up too high, right, then I get the noise back, right? So you're sharpening the noise and now the sky looks blotchy. Okay, so I'm bringing the sharpness back down, and we might have to run this one through the other Topaz. Okay, I could also try some of these other settings. Okay, so if I click on all clear, it just gives me sort of less options, less sliders, right? Low light, right, is working on certain different factors. It knows that you shot this in low light, right? That's done a really good job of the sky, right? But I want to increase the sharpness a little bit and get some more detail. I'm more concerned about the original detail than I am the sharpness, right? Let's keep the sharpness to a minimal. And I might zoom in even a little bit more. So already we can see, right, that there's a huge difference, okay? We're still getting the stars. The one thing you have to watch out for when you do heavy, aggressive noise reduction is that you don't lose your stars in your night sky, because they will get blurred over, because that's what denoise is doing essentially, is blurring over your stars and any white spots that it sees, right? Right, that looks actually pretty good. Let me see if we can fit this to the screen. It's going to slow down the preview process. Fantastic. All right, well, let's cancel that then. Let me see if there's any chats here. Your denoise is different. This is Denoise AI as a plugin. Do you have the standalone version? You can see up in the top corner there, mine says Denoise version 2.3.6 plugin. Okay, so if you're using a standalone, it might be slightly different, Charles. So take a look and tell me what your version is. Okay, I don't want to wait for this thing to preview. I want to apply it and bring it back to Photoshop, because I know it's going to take a minute, right? So let's just do that. Any other questions while I'm waiting for Topaz? So this is a really memory intensive, heavy memory program. I can also pull this one into Luminar after I do the denoise, which I probably will, because I want to see if we can just sort of make it a little bit more abstract in 3.7.1. Okay, so it looks like you have the standalone one, Charles, which probably looks slightly different. I haven't updated because they want me to pay for the update, so I haven't updated. So you may actually have a newer one. Did I ever investigate DxO RAW? A long time ago, Sheila. Can you share the link for the software analysis comparison, Rob, please, that I did? I did about 10 different softwares about 4 years ago. I compared Photoshop Elements, Luminar, which I think was Luminar 4 at the time, maybe, or Luminar 2018. I'm not even sure. But I compared Photoshop Elements, Lightroom, Luminar. What else did I compare? On One Raw. There were several different ones. And for beginners, Luminar was the one that came out. Yeah. Okay, so now we're back in Photoshop, and you can see right here that now on my layer, Topaz is now a filter, right? So I'm just going to hit save on my Photoshop document so that if anything happens, I've saved that. Okay, so I just did Command or Control S. Now I'm going to go do another filter, and I'm going to do Neo. And okay, what's my favorite filter in Neo? Everybody that's taken my Neo course or watched any of these videos knows what my favorite one is. Let me make it bigger on the screen again. There we go. Okay, so my favorite one, it'll give it away when I get over here because I've saved them in my favorites, is Mystical. And this is a perfect image for Mystical. Okay, so I'm going to take this one up quite high. Let's take it to, 30 or so. But look what happens if you go really high. Okay, I can adjust the amount of smoothness. Okay, but look at that. That's really cool, right? To me, it just gives it that same sort of feeling. I can boost the shadows a little bit here as well. It gives me that same sort of feeling of this show. See what it's doing? Let me come in a little closer. Okay, this is a 50% zoom. Okay, so let me turn it off, and on. Okay, if I dial it down or dial it up. Okay, so it gives it this really sort of glowy, magical. I actually really like it quite high, like 60%. Okay, 60 amount. So I'm going to apply that. Right. I can also come in here and try to erase. And I just did the keyboard shortcuts for Luminar Neo. We have a new video coming out on Friday, keyboard shortcuts for Luminar Neo. And I'm going to zoom in here and try and see what it does with this bubble. Okay, I'm just going to do erase. And if it doesn't do a good job, I'll just do it in Photoshop. Right. I'm spending a lot of time on this image because, as pointed out, it's a really cool image, right? Ah, look at that. Look what a great job it did. All right, so beautiful. I'm just going to go with that. Now, the other thing I was going to erase, and I just forgot while I was in here, is I want to try and get rid of this light, right? Because it's just a white light in the background. It looks like somebody's house or a building or something. And I want to see if I can just get it to blend in. Yeah, that's better. So that's what I'm going to do with a couple of these here. I'm just going to get these little white lights, erase. The Luminar Erase does a version of healing. Okay, so it looks for healing and fixing issues as opposed to cloning. And they don't have a cloning tool right now, and everybody's screaming for the cloning tool, but it's coming. I know it's coming. Okay, so look at that. I didn't have to do much there. I just did a couple of erases to get rid of some. I want to get rid of that. Looks like it's duplicating this branch. There we go. Okay, so I just got rid of a few of those little spots again. So it's similar to the one that I did in the bottom. Let me do a before and after. Okay. So any spot that you see, right? And if you decide that the mystical is too high, I can just go back and adjust it. Right? Let me just dial it down to about 50. Okay. The other one I'm going to try on here is Accent AI. It's going to boost up the highlights and boost up the shadows. It's not doing that much on this one. Interesting. Oh, there we go. So it's giving it actually more contrast. I'm not sure that's a good thing. I'm going to ignore that one. But let's try color harmony. This is another one of my favorites. You can see because it's in the favorites. And I'm going to do color contrast. Right, so let me just see if I can get, so here, look, we can really play up the red versus the blue, right? Do you want more blue? Do you want more red? So if we want more red, we can dial that in here. Okay, so you totally set how these things all work together. We could even attempt a sky replacement and see if we can get an even more dramatic night sky. I have one night sky in my pack, or a couple of night skies. Let's just see if I can get this one to work. I even have one. There's ones you can get with the Milky Way as well. That's not too bad. That's not too bad. We can actually see it actually blends better. It blends better than the Lightroom one when it masked the Lightroom one. I'm just gonna darken it a little bit, but it gives us more. Oh, see the sky's up here. We're gonna dial it down a little bit. It gives us more stars. Okay, so if you want more stars, we can definitely go with the sky like this. Okay, so I've dialed this one so that it's more blue and darken it a little bit. Okay, like so. That actually looks pretty good. Okay, I could do, that looks better. We could try another sky. Let's try this one. See, this one's actually got a little bit of aurora in the clouds. Okay, so if you want some aurora, and this one is actually star trails. So interesting, isn't it? Interesting because it kind of goes with the light show, right? So a little bit over the top, but let's not go with that one. We could also have fireworks in the sky. I got some fireworks, so we could get crazy. I think the first one was the best one. So this is in my sky pack, right? I'm just gonna check here to make sure it's blended okay. It's got a little bit of noise around the edge here, so I'm not sure if it's picking up. I'm just gonna blend it a little bit better here. That looks better. I find closed gaps and fixed details, right? If I play with this one here, I'm looking at around the trees. It still has the original sky there. Oh, it's filled in. Yeah, it's definitely filled in. But if I close some of these gaps, I get more of the trees. Right? Global covers the sky over top of the original image more. And fixed details fixes things like missing the ends of the trees. So I want to try that. Okay. So let's go with something like that. Still want to darken it a little bit. The sky went a little bit bright for me here. So, it does tend to darken the main scene, which is what I'm not crazy about. So I may actually just mask this one. This is something that people have sort of complained about with Luminar Neo, is that even though the scene relighting is set to 0, it's still darkening. It's still darkening the bottom. Oops. I think I did the wrong mask. There we go. Okay, so now I got the sky replacement, something like that. So let's apply it. You removed the box. Okay, so let's see what everybody else is saying here. Messed around today, did a Milky Way shot, and ended up using Lightroom, Luminar, and no sharpening. Too much mud. No doubt. Yes, Mystical Stephanie, you know me. TXO, Charles says, is a wee bit better, but not by much. The bad part is it won't look at JPEG files. Oh, that's interesting. So only RAW. Huh. Interesting. Software updates and changes too fast. It's hard to keep up. Yes, indeed. Yes, I will just say that I will agree, and that I know about something else that's currently happening, and I can't say anything yet because I don't have any details. I may have some more details next week. And I agree, Neo has come far really fast. Yeah. So which box did you mean, Linton? You removed the box. Oh, you mean the one in the bottom corner? Okay. Yeah, you could certainly try Luminar AI. So you remove this thing down here. Yeah, gotcha. All right. So the bubble was easily removed using Luminar. Let me just get over here. Now, if I want to do any editing here, what I want to do in terms of cloning is add a new layer and then just leave it as a blank layer, or just call it retouching. Okay. And leave it as a blank layer. The reason I don't duplicate if I'm doing editing on here, like if I want to try and get rid of this, I want to tone down this red spot right in the foreground here, is that when you duplicate your layer, your PSD gets bigger and bigger and bigger. But if you do, especially if you do many layers like this, but if you just do a blank layer, you can actually do your cloning and healing on this blank layer. Okay, so I've chosen the clone stamp tool, and I'm going to use darken blend mode. I might use darken. I might use either multiply or normal. We'll see. We'll see. Let's try multiply. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to zoom in here so you can see it. Okay, so see my mouse. I want to get a circle so that I'm pay attention to the one inside the green spot, not the actual green part. Okay, so the white circle, I want that circle just bigger than the area that I'm going to clone. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select, you have to set your target area when you're cloning. I'm going to set that area just above. Okay, so I'm clicking here. And then you can see when I put my mouse here, it's going to completely clone over. Okay, see that? So I used multiply mode, set to opacity 30%. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same thing, but from this side. Okay, because I don't want to come over that reflection, because that's what happened is I got rid of the reflection in the other version, right? Okay, so that was multiply mode. I'm actually going to undo both of those, and then I'm going to try normal mode and see if it blends differently. Okay, so I'm just going to try normal mode. . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . Okay, so which one do we like better? They look pretty similar. Oops. And see, when I'm doing normal mode, that was the challenge. I ended up with a boo-boo over there. Right. So I generally use darken or multiply so that when I make a boo-boo, you actually don't see it because it's only going to darken. It won't ever lighten. Right. So for example, if I go over, right, if I try and copy this over here, it's only going to put it in places where the water is lighter. Okay? So that looks pretty good. I could darken any of these if we want to come down a little bit as well. Okay, so we could darken those just a little bit, like so. Maybe this one a little bit as well. Okay. Yeah, these little fine tuning things are what make the big difference between, having a really good image and having a great image. Okay, take your images to the next level. I'm just toning them down, like 10%. A little hot spot in here, so on. Okay. Now the box, it actually doesn't bother me because it's dark, right? But if you want to try and blend it out, what I would do is a clone stamp layer. So that's Command Option Shift E. Now you're going to have to grab the keyboard shortcuts. You're going to have to grab the keyboard shortcuts, Rob, for Photoshop. Hey, Shauna. Yes, I'm a photographer. This is what I do. I teach photography. I've been a photographer for 30 some years. So, yeah. And I see a picture of Steven. She recently lost her puppy. Everybody send her sad faces. He's gone to the Rainbow Bridge. We miss you, Steven. Okay, so now to get rid of this, I want to do a selection around this box, okay, on this new layer. So I did a clone stamp layer, which means that it copied everything below it, okay? And now I want to do content aware fill. So I've chosen this, and I'm just going to choose content aware fill, and it's going to come up with this new box here. Oops, where is it? Oh, there we go. Okay, so we can see what it's going to do over here. Where's my box? There we go. Let me just make this bigger. It doesn't want to size for me again. Come on, Photoshop. This is my tiny little preview. Okay, let me just update it. Let's just see. Okay, so this is what it's going to look like up in here. If I zoom in, for heaven's sake, it should give me a bigger preview. There we go. There we go. All right, so this is what I'm seeing in this bottom corner here. Right, so it looks pretty good. It looks pretty good. Oh, now I have the option of exporting it to a new layer or doing it on the current layer. So I'm just going to do it on the current layer. And I can't even find the bottom of my thing's too big. It's off the screen. There we go. I just had to resize it. Okay, so when I choose apply or okay, it's going to fill that in. You can see it did a pretty good job. Now there's a little sort of kind of thing here that I would like to fix maybe, and I'm just going to use the healing tool and just sort of try and fix this little bit here because it looks like it duplicated or did something odd there. So I'm just going to fix that. Okay. But otherwise, that looks pretty good, right? And get rid of that too. There we go. All right, so let's see how we're doing. I'm going to move that. Let me go back to the beginning here of when we opened this in Photoshop. So that's what we started with. And that's where we're at now. So we sharpened and denoised, we changed the sky, we mystified, and then we did some cloning and healing. Rob, could you please share a link for Shauna to the tutoring page and also to our beginner course? But send me a PM on Facebook, Shauna, if you want more information. We have a full Photoshop class as well, Charles, if that's something that you're more interested in. Rob's busy grabbing lots of keyboard, lots of shortcuts here. So just to remind you, it's a private tutoring link and a basics beginner course. Actually, do the free beginners course. You can start there, and the Photoshop course for Charles. So is Jenny there, Linton? Maybe get her to look at this and say, hey, do you like this? Because if she's happy with it, I'll just send you the exported file if you like, and then you can print it out. So I'll consider it a gift, my gift. All right, so now I'm still in Photoshop. So now I just have to save it and close it. And it's going to bring me back to Lightroom. Okay, so now we can see the comparison. That's the one that we edited in Lightroom. Okay. Or I edited, got that pesky bubble, and there's the finished Photoshop version. No bubble, different sky. I think the sky makes a really big difference, actually. Yep. So I'm happy with that. Let's try something else. Marty sent in a kind of a similar image. So this one you sent a while ago, Marty. Tell me about this one. It almost looks like the moon is fake. Don't get Rob started on that one. There's like lines and stuff here in the moon. Did you add the moon? But it looks like there's something similar here, like some kind of a light show, right? So I'm going to see if I can pull out any detail on here. And it's a raw file. Okay. Sony as well. Okay. So it looks like you guys are compadres there in the Sony world. So I'm going to see if I can camera deep. Looks like the moon looks good. Light. Let's go with light. This one lightens a little bit. So I'm going to go with light. The exposure here is a little bit under. I'd love to be able to see more detail, but if we drag it up, see, this is what I mean by color noise when you get this odd colors happening, right? So I'd love to have a little bit more exposure. So I'm going to go mid-tones, and then I'm going to do my shift. Yeah, shift double click's not going to work because this white highlight here is blown out, but I'm going to ignore it, and I'm going to drag the whites up anyways. Okay. And then just give it ever so slightly a little bit of black. And then I want to control these highlights. There we go. See, that gives it a little bit more contrast. Okay. Punch up the shadows a little bit. And it's hard to know what color this is. We need to do some cropping because there's a lot of extra space here. I'm just going to go free form. Rob was talking about this in our Lightroom course where he's rarely seen me go not free form. There's something cutting off this reflection here. So I'm actually just going to go with it and say that that's the edge of the image, and then try and line that up as straight as possible. Okay, because I like the reeds coming over the moon like that. Okay. But these highlights in the moon, it's got some paper or something showing. They projected it. Haha. Ah, Daniela. Bienvenido. It was a light show where they created a display where they projected the moon as well as other objects. Aha, okay, it's projected. We announce it on YouTube, Daniela. So if you go to our YouTube channel, I'll send you a direct link. Or actually, Rob, if you could provide the direct link for her, it's literally just youtube.com/digitalphotomentor/live. Here, I'll even grab it for you because I got it handy here. Okay, and then hopefully it doesn't start.
If you're
There we go. Okay, so there is a link, and that link will always take you to what's coming. So it will show you the date and the time or how many hours left before it's coming. And then there's also a thing where you can set up notifications on there, Daniela, to notify you. So it'll pop up in your phone or whatever saying that, hey, Darlene is live in 5 minutes or whatever, right? Botanical garden, it was the end of a pond. Okay, cool. So we can actually, do some editing on here. I would be tempted to pull this into Photoshop. If you wanted to make this look like, the real moon, I would be tempted to to pull it in and try and maybe get rid of the lines if that's something that you want to do. But I'm going to just do select subject, and then I'm going to invert it here in Lightroom because I want to darken the highlights on these things in the background and brighten the background a little bit more in the shadows without brightening the moon. And I'm going to do something different on this one because we're getting a lot of noise, but let me just show you what I have in mind here. We got lots of colors coming out though, okay? And partly we're getting the noise because it's a little underexposed, okay? I'm going to give this a little bit of blue, take some of that red out. There we go. So starting point, now where we're at, okay? So we've pulled out a lot of detail. And what's happening up here in the sky, I don't know if you can see it or not, there's quite a bit of noise, right? So I could definitely do some noise reduction, but I'm going to turn this into a matte black, okay? So if you've seen my video on curves, if you can share that one, Rob, sorry, I've got Rob running around finding all kinds of links here. If you could please share the curves video on YouTube, I show how to use the curves, and this applies to curves in Luminar, curves in Photoshop, anywhere you're using curves, okay? When you have this line here, we're on the main curve, right? Anything that goes up is lighten, down is darken, okay? And this bottom left corner is black, right? So if I go in on the bottom, I get more black. But if I go up on the bottom, we actually make black, not black. Okay, so usually black is 000 kind of thing on your number scale. Okay, but when we go up, we're actually telling it, no, I don't want black to be pure black. So it's like sort of printing it on a matte finish paper, right? So you know how the blacks are, they have like a different kind of sheen, right? So I'm just going to play with that a little bit. And then let's try some denoise in here. Now, this one could benefit from going to Topaz as well for some denoise, because you'll see what happens if I come in here. Okay, I'm just going to brighten the image overall, just too much, just so you could see the noise for now, and then I'll undo that in a minute. So if we go extreme noise reduction, right, we start to get some weird stuff happening. You see that? It's like banding and stuff, okay? So I don't want to go too far. And Lightroom's sharpening and Lightroom's noise reduction is really not the best. Okay, so it's not doing a great job, but there's the original without any noise reduction. And that's exactly what I mean by color noise. Okay, so to get rid of that, I would do the color noise reduction. Okay, see, that's the color noise. That's a great example of that. Okay. But again, I would probably take this one to sharpen, okay, and denoise. So now let me get my exposure back where I had it. So let's take this one to Topaz, okay? But you can see that it is fairly underexposed as well. So when you're shooting, right, when you're shooting stuff like this, it's really hard to tell the exposure, and your camera will be fooled. I have 2 cats on my desk, so I'm not sure how this is going to go down. Munch. Hi, everybody. This is Munch. She's going to go sit over here. Whoa. Okay. So I'm going to lose my train of thought. What was I talking about? Noise. Okay, we're going to do noise reduction. And I'm going to take this one directly to Topaz because I don't think I need to do anything else in Photoshop. So I'm just going to do, this time, I'm going to go edit in, and I'm going to find Topaz denoise. Okay. Make sure I edit a copy with Lightroom adjustments, because otherwise it's going to open the raw file. Okay. And I'm actually going to change this just for this purposes to a JPEG sRGB, because I know that if I send a large TIFF file in a higher color profile, it's just going to take that much longer. Yes, she is, Trish, but the other one is currently behind my computer right now, and if I have 2 cats on my desk, I end up with swatting. So we call it cat boxing. We end up with cat boxing here, and I don't want that on my desk. Done and done. Awesome. Lightroom Classic is non-responsive, but that's okay. It's doing its thing. All right, let's have a look at an area where we can see the noise. See, this is why Topaz products are really, really memory intensive, right? Like it takes just that long to draw the preview, right? I'm going to go all the way here. Now, we're low light and we're denoise, so I'm going to try and see what it comes up with if I choose auto. Okay. I have a feeling I'm going to want more. Yeah, I wasn't happy with the auto. Let's try all clear auto. Still, it's doing a weird thing there. Right, let's go high. And I need to recover some detail. Now this one, all right, if we choose not to recover detail, that maybe is not such a bad thing. It's kind of blurring it out a little bit, right? It's missing some noise in here, but maybe that's not such a bad thing. We definitely want some color noise reduction because we know that there was that color noise in there. But that actually looks way better, right? So let's just apply this and see what it looks like when we bring it back into Lightroom. Sorry, now I've got cat hair all over my face. Holland. Lots of stuff being chatted about zebras and all kinds of things. It was handheld and I was worried about blowing out the highlights, so I pushed it until I was worried about the zebras. I think maybe that you made another word there, the zebras. What's a zebra, Marty? Now they're talking about zebras. He says now Munch is running around the basement. That's where Rob has his office. She thinks it's cat food time, but she thinks every time is cat food time. Okay, let's have a look here. So that denoise did some kind of weird stuff in the sky here. So I'm tempted to take this one into Luminar Neo, actually. So there's the Lightroom version. If I zoom in, let me do a comparison here. If we look at these side by side, this is the Lightroom one, unsharpened, undenoised. There's the denoise. But see how it missed part of it in here? Right? It's kind of missed, but look at that. It did a great job down here in the water, right? So I'm tempted to take this one, and what I should have done is take it to Photoshop because now I want to do Luminar on it, right? But we'll just go from here, okay? So imagine I went to Photoshop. Now I'm gonna do Luminar on it to blur, and I could, I literally could just take it to Photoshop and do some blurring stuff there. But Luminar just makes it so much easier, to be honest. It's just, a couple of buttons, right? To mystical or mystify, right? So I want to do my favorite. There's a few options here. I'm going to zoom in so we can see what it's doing because we're really kind of going for abstract now. So I could take this one up high and that solves some of those uneven stuff, solve some of that problem, okay? It's still blotchy up here in the sky. So let's do that. And the other option there's a few of them actually under glow, right? So there's Orton effect, which actually gives a nice glow, like so, and it adds contrast, but usually brightens. So I'm just gonna check the brightness here. I don't want to add contrast. To see what that's doing, it's kind of, that's too dark maybe. This one's adding too much contrast. We could also try glow, which tends to add a glow around anything that is light, right? Like the moon will then glow, which will help some of the issues that it had with the lines on it. So the moon glowing is actually a good thing. Let's just darken it a little bit. Okay, so we can do moon glow. And I just had an idea here. I mean, we could try a sky replacement. I don't know if it's going to find it because it's pretty dark. but we could certainly try it. The fact that it's allowing me to choose something is a good sign here. So let's try this one. Because if it didn't find a sky at all, it wouldn't have even given me this option of this tool. Okay, so it looks like it's done something. Where did it put the sky? I have no idea. I think it put the sky down here. I think it's confused because the moon is in the water, because it's not putting the sky where I expected it to put the sky. So we're just going to undo that one. Okay. Another option you could do with this one in here is actually sun rays. But I just want to get this glow sort of happening here. So I'm going to go back, delete the sky. Oops, shoot. I deleted the glow when I wanted the glow on the moon. See, that one is doing some nice things. Pick up the shadows a little bit. And then I got to go back and add glow again that I deleted. So there's various different ways to do softening in Photoshop. But like I said, it just makes it easier in here. Okay, so this one here, glow on the moon. Like so. Okay, let's take this back. It's still blotchy, and it's not, great in the sky here. So I would probably do some more blur, and I might use the erase tool to try and get rid of some of these lines, or I said, take the whole thing to Photoshop. You meant zebras. Okay. I get what you mean, Marty. So it's showing like zigzaggy lines. Gotcha. On other cameras or other models, just call it the blinkies, and it just blinks. So yeah, wasn't sure what you meant. That's obviously a Sony term. Not good erase. That light sometimes makes a mess. Do you mean the erase tool in Lightroom or in Luminar? Trish went to a street festival with light projections on buildings, so this is really helpful. I couldn't use my tripod, but did have a fast lens, so but interesting to see what kind of noise I have. It annoys me, and I'll get on my soapbox talking about restrictions on photography because people are stupid and they will trip over your tripod and break their legs, so they don't want you to have your tripod there. Well, people could open their eyes and see that you have a tripod and not trip over it, right? So they make these rules. Things like, they put labels on clothes that say do not iron while wearing because somebody did it, right? Like coffee is hot. They put that label on the McDonald's coffee now because somebody got burned and so did McDonald's, right? I am also of the belief of I do something and I ask for forgiveness sometimes, not permission, right? So I'll do it until I'm told not to do it. Right. So I see what I can get away with. Is it best to do denoise before any sharpening? You kind of have to do them as a dance together, Charles. So that's why I'm saying if I'm doing topaz, I usually choose one tool or the other, right? Not denoise and then sharpen. Because if I do denoise, then I'm trying to sharpen what's already been blurred by the denoise tool, or vice versa. If I sharpen, now I'm sharpening the noise and then I'm trying to get rid of it. So you kind of have to do both at the same time, if that makes sense. Yeah, it would be difficult to edit, Marty. And part of the thing is, like you said, it's a little bit underexposed, right? And because of the challenging conditions that you had, absolutely. Yeah, great one, Sheila. Platypod. So what she's talking about is a platypod. Let me just see if I can find it on Amazon because I have one. Have I used it? No. Have I taken it around the world with me? Yes. And let's see. Okay, platypod, the Ultra. I think it's this one. Tell me if it's the right one, Sheila. Hang on. So basically what this thing is like it's a little flat thing that you use as a tripod instead of thing with legs. It just sits on the ground. So it looks like a base, right? That's it. And you can clamp it to something, you can tie it to a tree, or you have these little legs that you can give it. and people generally don't object to it. So I'll grab a link to this one and pop that in the chat for you, because you can get away with stuff like this when places say no tripod, or you could also get away with like a gorilla pod, which is what my my I can't move it because my microphone is on it, but it's one of these. Yeah, it's inside my keyboard thing. It's the bendy ones, right? The bendy tripods. Let's see. Just working with Leo today. Don't like some halos. It leaves around stuff. So which tool were you using, Daniela? Actually, you know what would be a great exercise? Send me that image that you're working on today for next week, because I have your other bird image as well. But if you've got one that you're having trouble with halos, next week is Luminar week. So I will do that one in Neo next week if you send me that. And then I'll see what I can come up with. But let me know when you fill in the form which tool you were using where you got the halo, or you could put the raw file and then your edited one so I can see what trouble that you're having. All right, so now let's see what we got here. Okay, so that was the original Lightroom edit. That one was after I did some denoise, and then there's the Luminar edit. So I just sort of blurred things a little bit and got rid of a lot of the noise that was happening up here. Again, it's not great. I wouldn't push this one, to a really large print or anything. But is it fun? Yeah, absolutely. In the future, Marty, if you are in a situation like this, err on the side of giving it a little more exposure, because you can usually pull the highlights back better than you could pull detail up of the shadows. Okay, especially on something like this, because when it's so dark, you just end up with a whole lot of noise. And if you're already at high ISO, then it just magnifies the noise. Right? What ISO were you at here again? 500. So you could have gone a lot higher on this one. Honestly, part of the reason why it's really grainy is because it was about 2 stops underexposed. So if you'd shot it at ISO 2000, and this is where it seems counterintuitive, right? That if you go with a higher ISO, you're going to get more noise. But if you shoot with a lower ISO and crank it because you underexposed it, you end up with about the same. Am I saying exposed to the right? Yes. Scott Keys. I think, yeah, which Scott are you talking about, Sheila? A gorilla pod. Yeah, that's the ones I'm talking about with the bendy. You've lost it. Uh-oh. Scott Kelby. David's guessing Scott Kelby. Possibly. Okay. So yes, put the ISO higher. Okay. All right, well, we've been playing with nighttime images today that were quite fun. I've got one of Trisha's here as well. It's not nighttime, but it's busy in a different sort of way, right? We've got Delhi, right? India. India is a whole other thing unto itself. It's a whole other world, right? Oh, especially old Delhi. And I have some shots almost exactly like this, but not from up high. So this is a really cool shot, Trish. And I get why you want to capture this. And her question was, what do I focus on here? How do I edit this? Okay. So that was just the first one I found, David. Yeah, I could find it. You can find another one on B&H or on Amazon. That's better. I just grabbed the first one. Okay, so what I'm going to do is camera profile. Let's see what she's shot here. And her camera is a Canon. Okay, so Canon 80D. So these are going to be Canon profiles. I don't know if there's going to be much difference. Look at that. Landscape. Can you see the difference? Landscape gives it a bit more punch and a little bit less sort of haze. And we can build on that. So I'm going to go with landscape. And Delhi always looks like this. If you go to Delhi expecting sunrise and sunset photos, it's not going to happen because it's always smoggy like this. Like it's really smoggy, really bad. Sometimes we couldn't see across the street. Okay, so to increase the contrast a little bit and to talk about what Trish said is, what do I bring out in this image? Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I want to know what's actually sharp. So I'm going to actually use dehaze. Look at what that does. See that? See how it brings out the detail? Honestly, though, I don't know if I would do it to that degree because to me, the haze is part of Delhi, right? But if you want to bring out more contrast, let's drag it up. And then I'm going to check some things like lens corrections here, right? To make sure there's no chromatic aberration, right? Can you see there's a little red line? I'm zoomed into 200 here, right? So can you see there's a little red line on the side here? That's chromatic aberration. When I check it off, it's gone. Can you see it? Watch the edge of the white poles. Red line, gone. Okay, so do chromatic aberration adjustments or corrections on all your images. We could do a profile enable, right? So that's the lens. So it just kind of corrects for the distortion if you want to do that, okay? And if we want to try and transform this one so that the verticals are vertical, I'm going to try auto and see what the program does. It just tilted it a little bit. Let's try level. Yeah, it's not doing a whole great deal. Let's try full. Didn't do much. So we'll just level it, okay? Because she's up high, shooting down, so we shouldn't have any verticals converging. And I don't know that I could find any verticals to use as a guide. If I want to do the guided transform, I need to find some verticals that are straight. And honestly, I don't know if they are in Delhi. I could check that by going to this is the crop tool. So I just did R on the keyboard and I'm looking at the windows, like the edges here. And I'm looking for, are the buildings at least straight up and down? Okay, so maybe a little bit more like so, right? I'm just eyeballing. That looks pretty good. Okay. So now we just added a bit of contrast with the dehaze. I can check some color balance here. Let's try auto and see what it gives us. Okay, definitely warmed it up. I would tend to agree with that. And now that it's warmed it up or given it more yellow, I'm going to go back to these profiles again. And I'm actually going to go down to the vintage. Okay, because to me, Delhi is like another old world. It's old time, right? So we could really push the yellow, okay, or something faded out. So you could go the opposite way and give it some punch, or go this way. That's kind of cool. That reminds me of like a 70s picture that's faded out. So that's actually kind of cool. This one too, right? So you could totally give it a different style. Let's go with this one. I kind of like this one. And see, it's made the blacks. Like if I try and add black now, look, it doesn't go all the way to the end of the histogram. So it's already, this profile is matte black. That's what I did with the curve, right? So we could do that ourselves as well. So if I didn't want this vintage one, let me go back to landscape. Okay, if we didn't want the vintage one, and I'm going to do shift, double click on the blacks and the whites, right? And what that does is it sets the endpoint. And I know that it's setting the white lower because it's got some neon signs there. So I'm just going to ignore them and go a little higher. And just a little bit of detail out of the shadows. Okay, so giving it more contrast, right? And if I want that matte look, all I got to do is go to the tone curve and just drag that up. See that? So you can create your own matte or you can find a profile. But the one thing that I found was interesting here is, I don't know if you saw him sitting on the post, this bird, okay? So I was looking for something that was sharp here, okay? So we've got 80th of a second. So one thing you want to be careful of, Trish, is when you are shooting, especially with a lens like this, it's a 109 millimeter lens. You want your shutter speed to be 1 over at least that. And when you're dealing with a crop sensor camera, which is what you have, so it's not full frame, you're actually dealing with 1.5 times that focal length, so 150. So your shutter speed here, to keep it sharp, you wanted to have at least 1 over 150 or 1 over 200. Because I'm looking through everything and I don't see a single bit that's sharp, which indicates camera shake, okay? So this is another one that I can pull through Topaz. I'm not going to do that today because we've done enough Topaz. I also do see actually some sharpness up here in the wires. So it looks like perhaps your focus also hit up here, okay? And this is the tricky part. When you have a scene like this, right, what focus mode are you using? Are you using single dot, meaning, Trish, did you have one of the dots on your camera and you pointed it there to focus there, or did you let the camera choose, right? If you have all of the dots active and the camera's choosing, it's probably going to choose something closer to the camera, whereas I probably would have focused on the street, okay? So I would have focused down here, okay? And if you're worried about getting a high ISO, I would have opened up my aperture as well, okay? So I probably would have been shooting at f5.6 or so, or open, more open, okay? When I'm doing street photography, I'm almost always fairly wide open. f4, f2.8. My little Fuji camera, this one here on the table behind me, has f2, so I use that a lot. All right. So to finish this one, what I think I wanted to do is I saw this bird here, okay? And I got the idea of I want to focus on him, sort of. So let's just play around here and see what Lightroom thinks is the subject. Okay, so it thinks this whole middle part is a subject, which is, probably not too bad. So I could add some texture and clarity in here. See how it brings up the blacks though, so I don't want to do that so much. Okay. And then I could also minimize and do the opposite. So I could create a duplicate and invert it, okay? And then darken this outside part. Okay, so now, see the big difference? Now the focus really comes into the middle of the image. And I'm kind of want to see where this is going because I don't want to focus. I don't want to sharpen or don't want to darken the wires so much. So I'm actually going to subtract a radial gradient and just put it in the middle here. So I just want to darken the outer bits. Let's try something like that. Okay. So let's see what these masks are doing. See how it's taking attention away from the edge, especially over here. Okay. And I would probably even darken more on this side and this side. So I might make another one. I got to move this thing out of the road. I might make another one. And I'm going to do a linear gradient down from the top because I want to darken. And I'm going to add to it a second linear gradient from this side because I just want to darken these two edges and bring the exposure and the highlights down. Okay. So I'm still bringing attention down to the street. Okay. Let me turn these masks off to see what they're doing. Okay. No masks, masks. See that? So your attention comes right in. What's the other thing? Let's look at this one upside down. What's the other thing that your eye goes to? Let me get me off the screen here for a second. Okay, where does your eye go now? Let me get this one. There's two things that my eye go to now that it's upside down. Okay, so I've solved the problem of it going to the edges, so it's not going down here. And I like the way the city sort of fades out in the background. It's not going over here to the ladders, but where is your eye going? I'm Fuji as well, Charles and Daniela. Yeah, I'm Fuji, or is that what you're saying? Your eyes go to the yellow street cable. Okay, so you mean this one that's going right across the middle here? Okay. Stephanie says the tuk-tuk. Yes, absolutely. It's going here. Oops, where's my mouse? Sorry. So Daniela's going here and this one here. Yeah, and the bananas, right? The bananas. And also this guy in the red shirt, the bicyclist, I think. So kind of bit to this neon over here, right? But see how handy this upside down thing is, right? Because we really get an idea of where our eyes is going. So now I can deal with this thing here if I want to darken it. And I can also deal with this bottom thing. So let's deal with the tuk-tuk. So I'm going to do select color range. And I'm just going to select the yellow. Right? Now, of course, it's going to select all yellows, which is fine. But I'm going to dial it down. And then I'm just going to say I'm going to intersect it. So remember, intersect means it has to be both things. Intersect it with a radial gradient so that I get anything that's that yellow, but only within the circle. Okay. Then I can dial the saturation down a little bit, highlights, and just darken the whole thing. Right? See, now the tuck starts to disappear. Okay. And if I expand this, expand this color range a little more, I want to get the top of it as well. Okay. I could also add another color range because he's in the circle too, and say I want to add him as well. So see, when I selected that red, right? So he's within that circle, right? And I want to add again, because I still am not happy with the top of this tuck, a luminance range. That one there. Okay, so it has to be, see, I added luminance range. I didn't put it intersecting. There we go. I just put it underneath color range. See how I did that? I reordered them, right? So if the luminance range was up here, makes a big difference, then it's below, okay? So where you put these masks in which order, it matters. So if I turn this one off, now it's taking care of the guy in the red. Oh, it is picking up some red up here, but that's okay, because that color range is up there again. Let me put that one down below. There we go. Now we should have got that problem. See that? So everything is below radial gradient, so it has to be inside. Okay? I could also do a regular edge vignette here, and that's going to help deal with some of these edges as well. Right? Let's feather it, bring it in. And I might go color priority on this one just to fade it a little bit better. We can even crop this one a little. I want to keep the guy in the bottom and I want to keep the bird, right? But we could probably do with a little bit less of this building over here and a little bit less of this one. Right? Possibly even this sign, because this sign bugs me as well. What if we go square? How do we feel about square? What does everybody think? When the thing is upside down, it looks like a bridge. Yeah. Well, have you ever been to Delhi, Daniela? Guess what? It is a bridge for monkeys. They run around the city across the wires. You wouldn't believe it. Yeah, there's monkeys everywhere. So it is a bridge. Could I explain the intersect again? Rob says it's hip to be square. Very funny. Very funny. And looks good. All right. Okay, so let me try and explain the intersect again. Let me see if I can get a better image to do that with, one that's nice and clean. And I'm not meaning a better image, Trish. I mean for demonstration purposes. Okay. Let me do this one actually, because this one might work interestingly enough. I don't even know whose image this is. Bill's image. So apparently we're going to do Bill's image as well. So I'm going to do a camera profile. Another Fuji shooter. Let's do Provia. And I'm just going to check my highlights and make sure I have some blacks. Okay, this is another great one to watch the color. Okay, I'm not adjusting the exposure. I'm going to adjust the blacks and watch what happens to saturation. See, the more black you have, the more saturation you get. Okay. All right, so now I want to do, for example, let's do select subject and see what happens here. Just going to give this a little bit of clarity. So let's see if it picks up on the flowers. Okay, it did. So I'm going to change my mask to red so you can see it selected the flowers. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to crank the exposure so you can really see what it's doing, what it's selected. Okay, if I say I want to intersect with, okay, intersect means, okay, I'm going to take that down, not quite so much. Actually, let me darken. Okay, so let me say I want to darken the red flower, but not the pink flower. Okay, so now I want to intersect this mask, which I've currently got selected of both flowers, now how could I select the second flower? I could either do a radial gradient because it's round, so that might work nicely, okay? Or I could do a color range, okay? Because they're different colors. So if I choose color range, what's going to happen is it's going to say when I select the red, and you'll see this happen, that it has to be within the subject, which was defined as both flowers by Lightroom, and red. Okay, so it's going to unselect the pink one. So if I choose color range and then just choose red, okay, so now I can adjust how much of the red is selected. Okay, you'll notice that it is picking up some of the center of this one. Okay, so watch as I define the red. Okay, so it's picking up red, but it's also picking up this over here. Okay, so then I can say, well, that's not working. So I'm just going to delete this one because I don't want any of the pink flower. Okay, so then I could say intersect, and let's try the radial gradient that I selected first. Okay, so now I'm going to just make a circle over this flower. Okay, let's do a little bit less feather. Okay, and where the mask is showing, I'm going to change this to, let's do image on white. Okay, so that is currently what is being selected. Okay, so I can refine this one by changing the feather, and I still got some of that pink flower in there, right? So I can expand this. But what this one is doing is it's saying, when I look at the entire mask, I want to select the subject, which I did, and then intersect is only within this circle. Okay. So then once I show this one here, let me just turn the overlay off. Okay. So see, it's only darkening that portion of the flower, but it's not darkening the background because it has to be part of the subject and within that circle. Does that make more sense, Daniela? It's both. Okay. Now I don't want to do this to poor Bill's flowers. Okay. Let's do a select subject on this one. And I've just changed my overlay option here, right? So I've changed it to image on white so I see what's selected here. Okay. So if I didn't want to get any of the green, I could do a really, really specific color selection. Okay. This one here, I'm going to add some texture and some clarity. And I'm going to call this one flowers. And I'm going to duplicate and invert. Okay, so this is another option that you get with masks. Duplicate and invert. Now I have the background. Okay, on the background, I'm going to do less texture, less clarity, less highlights, which will darken a bit, less contrast, less exposure, and I could even do sharpening and saturation. Okay, so I can minimize all of this stuff in the background. I can also shift the color. Okay, so if I want the greens, more yellow. Okay, so see what this one is doing. Now I'm going to call it background. So this one is affecting the background, and this one is affecting the flowers. Okay. Can I remove the violet? Can I remove the violet petal mask with a brush? You mean when I had the circle? Yes, I could and use the edge refine brush, but there'd be an easier way to do that, actually. Yes, I did something similar with Neo. So if I wanted to do that again, okay, so let me just go select subject again. Okay, then I'm going to intersect with the radial gradient. So I'm going to do my best job to get as little of the pink flower as possible, but I can't not get it, right? Because they're touching. Okay, so I've got all the red flower and I've still got some of this pink flower. Okay, so this mask here. So then what I could do is subtract. Okay, so if I subtract color range and then I just select this pink, okay, now what I have selected is just that. Okay, And I can refine the pink color range to make sure that I'm not getting, see, I'm getting rid of some of the red as well. I could also get rid of the green if I don't want the green, right? Because there's green in there. See that? So now I'm really specific, okay? So if I turn this mask off, let's just do something crazy with this one. So I'm going to do contrast. I could brighten it, darken it. Okay, so I just added crazy contrast on this flower. Like so. Let's do crazy texture as well. Crazy texture, crazy clarity. So just this flower. I'm sure that it was useful to them, yes. And this is why these lives are so great, because one person asked a question and then other people may have had the same question but were too embarrassed to ask, or they didn't know the language to ask, or they may watch this later. They may not be watching live. They may watch this replay later and absolutely benefit from that. So have you done any of my courses, Danielle? I think you were you doing the Lightroom class, right? Thanks so much, Charles. Well, this is not my photography, so none of these are my photography, but I appreciate your vote of confidence on that. What was I going to show them? Was I going to show you guys something? I forget. I did. I will show you something. I'm going to switch my catalog because those of you that are doing the Lightroom course, I did 2 lessons that we just uploaded. We have our last live tomorrow, actually. And I did one of my images. So these are my images. But I did an image where it was landscape start to finish. And I'm going to, oops, hang on. I forgot that I'm off the screen here. No, I got to fix my hair. I want to show the before and after. So I want to hide my screen here. Okay. So I want to show the before. Let me get the, oops. Let me get the before on the screen. Okay. Now I can share my screen. All right, here we go. Okay. So this is the before image, right? Charles says he's checked out my photography. You're scoping me, are you, Charles? All right, this is the before. Are you ready for the after image? This is all done in Lightroom. That's after, right? And this is the Three Sisters Mountain Range in Canmore, beautiful Canmore, Alberta, basically on our back step, about 4-hour drive from us. First time with Lightroom. So do you have an Adobe membership then, Daniela, so that you have both if you have the photography package? If so, okay, so you have them both. Yeah, check out our Lightroom class. Like, we're literally just doing the last lesson tomorrow in terms of live classes. And how that works is you can ask some of the other people here. Sheila's doing the class as well. A few others, Dave, if Dave is still here, are doing the Lightroom class with me, and we're on lesson 45 and 46 doing that tomorrow. So there's 46 lessons inside the course. Maybe share a link to the page where she can check out some of the preview videos, Rob, and for everybody else. And actually, I can even find that on my screen. Oh, David says, Lightroom course was amazing. Well, we got one more to go, David. We got one more to go. Did I do a sky replacement? On the landscape one? Nope. It's just the sky that was there. Just the sky that was there. So if I come back in here, right? Oops, I gotta go into the develop. It's there, right? It's just not visible because it was really overexposed, right? And if I remember correctly, this may actually have been a merged HDR file that I gave you, because it's a DNG, and I may have merged it as an HDR. And yes, you can see that was taken with my Fuji X-T1 a few years ago. Okay. Lightroom course link, please, Rob. That's what we were talking about. So he's shouting at me from the basement. Lightroom course link. I will go back over here because I have a slide for that. I have it in my Lightroom, but I went there. So I showed a quick preview, but that lesson is up there now, guys. So you can watch that one. And we're going to do that one and the portrait one tomorrow in our final live lesson. And what we do in the classes, just for other people's benefit who are watching later, or for Daniela who hasn't done the course, is that all the lessons are recorded and available for you on the website, just like all of our other courses. And the live sessions, what we've done is Q&A. So we watch the lessons together, and then the students can ask questions about that particular lesson. So it's been really fun, really engaging. So that's the Lightroom course. There you go. All right. So I think I'm going to call it a day. We've done a lot of photos today. Just a reminder to submit some more photos. Next week, we're back to Luminar Neo, and I always need more images, so keep sending them. I'd love to see that one that you were having trouble with the halos, Daniela, so go ahead and submit that. And I'll leave this one here on the screen about our Lightroom course. Exposed to the right. And honestly, Sheila, like, I don't expose to the point where I'm overexposing, because you don't want to clip too much. If you're clipping a little bit, you can pull it back, right? But you don't want to overexpose to stop. So you don't want to go too far to the other extreme. But when you underexpose and you pull up the shadows, you are going to get noise, right? Thanks, Deb. I'm glad you're always here, and I'm glad you're always learning something. Sheila says, I thought I knew stuff about Lightroom. I was very wrong. Check out some of the reviews on the Lightroom class. You're not the only one to say that, Sheila. I think David had the similar reaction and one of our other fellows. So check out the reviews on the course and see if it's right for you. But we offer a 30-day money-back guarantee on all of our courses as well. So if you purchase a course and it's not for you, we'd be very surprised, first of all, but we would be we're happy to refund if it's not for you. So I want to say thanks for everybody for tuning in this week. We'll be back next week with Luminar Neo. And let me know what Jenny thinks, Linton, if you want me to send you that image, if she's happy with my edit. Take care, everyone.